And so it was in the 1970th year, the 30th day, and the 5th month that the Reverend, as you've already heard so many times, Tony Sargent, was inducted into the ministry of the Worthing Tabernacle, thus to become the 4th pastor in the then 74th year of the church's history. A manse was purchased that year. It was, in fact, for many, many years in Richmond Road at the far end, but a more modern building was purchased in 1970 in Offington Avenue for the sum of £7,550. Even better still, the subscription of the Tabernacle publication called The Messenger, which was a bi-monthly publication, sold for the princely sum of 4 and 6pence per annum. For the uninitiated, that's 22.5p. I'm not sure whether this had anything to do with Tony's arrival, but the Sussex Auxiliary of the Fellowship of Independent Evangelical Churches decided that they would consider arranging an old folks' place somewhere in West Sussex, and this eventually finished up to what we now know as Koinonia.
Sister Helen, our full-time deaconess, retired that year. Peter Bays was in Nepal, India, Pakistan, Lebanon, Iran, Afghanistan on missionary duty. Here at home, Doug Saunders hired a coach to bus kids in from East Worthing, and 30 people were asked to subscribe 1 shilling per week to pay for it. And there were some new elders, Graham Brown, Mike Jenkins and John Milne.
Miss Fairs, of ever blessed memory, was appointed as assistant to and secretary to the pastor to assist him in many of his works. Sheila Falker, better known to us here as Sheila Berry, our missionary at that time, working with BMMF, returned to Tansen in Nepal. Doris Dove, now for the golden oldies of you, she was Sister Doris, of loved memory again, who was here prior to Sister Helen and deaconess for many, many years. During that time, felt a call to work amongst the Chinese. Doris returned to Malaya. And the church porches on a much more mundane level. The church porches and some rooms in 1970 were redecorated.
A visitation team was established, made up of some of the elders' wives. And believe it or not, the treasurer had to count a weekly average offering of £96 2 and 6pence. Mr. Voisey, who was the church secretary before Ian Land, retired, and he and his wife went to live in London. I don't know why London, after leaving Worthing. And Mr. Hattersley retired as an elder. And our first duplicating machine was purchased.
In 1971, quite a number of firsts took place in the tabernacle. As many of you know, we have been for many years very much involved with Operation Mobilization. Well, the person responsible for introducing us to OM and to the ships was Graham Payne. One of the other firsts is that the Bible study notes were produced for the very first time, and we were studying the book of Romans in 1971, for those of you that haven't remembered. And Roy Goodall and Peter Goodall also were responsible for this. The Christian Publicity Organization moved to new premises. In fact, those premises are those that are now operated and occupied by the Far Eastern Broadcasting Association just up the road here. Another first, again, was the membership was divided into 12 groups and was supervised. Each group was supervised by an elder. And the National Assembly of the FIEC was held at the Tabernacle. And one of our members, Heather Willis, was moved to Switzerland to work there with InterVarsity Fellowship.
10 of our young people supported the Belgian Gospel Mission, taken to Belgium with Michael Fleming. And that year, our lovely old organ, which used to be up in the middle here, broke down. Peter Goodall and Trevor Pettifer led children's missions at East Preston, and the church supported Dick Saunders at a large rally at Central Hall, Westminster. That year too, we celebrated our 75th church anniversary, and the speakers were the Reverend Selwyn Morgan of Reading and Eric Land. Another special speaker that year was Arthur Pont, the General Secretary of BMMF.
(1972) General News. Mr. Walls, Joy Edwards' father, retired as an elder, and Ray Gill was appointed. The new organ was commissioned on Easter Sunday. A recorded service was made for Radio Brighton. Doris Dove met the Queen in Malaysia. 74 folk visited Weck at Bulstrode on Easter Monday. The Tab Messenger went up to 5p a copy. We had a visit from the London Emmanuel Choir, and Dr. Martin Lloyd-Jones took the services celebrating the Tab's anniversary. The Tab joined with 16 other Worthing churches in collecting blankets and used clothes for the Mayor's Help the Aged appeal. A canoe making workshop was set up in the basement for Boys Club, whose leader at that time was Graham Brown. Tapes of the services became available. The Tab was used for several outings that year. Firstly, Enfield Evangelical Free Church and Mildmay and Westminster Baptist Church. The FIC Fraternal also was held at the Tab, and the Tab joined in United Open Air Witness on Sundays at 4 p.m. at the Steen and 8 p.m. at Splash Point, which were all well attended. And the Worthing outreach took place in August with door-to-door visitation, films and gospel meetings. Visiting speakers included Glenn Davis of the Dorothea Mission, Theodore Welch of OMF, Ray Gill and Eric Land.
The General News for 1973. Ray Gill took up full-time evangelistic duties in the county. Tony Sargent was laid aside with back problems for 4 weeks. I can remember that, I had a bad back at the same time. Richard Wormbrandt was at the Assembly Hall. Electric typewriter was purchased to help with the production of Bible study notes. Brian Hughes took over the fledgling tape ministry. The Church Weekly News Sheet commenced publication, or gossip column, whatever you call it. The first minibus was purchased. The missionary newsletter booklet included contributions from Doris Dove, Gladys Garner, Olive and Hugh Morton, Heather Willis, Peter and Molly Bays, Chris Manning, the Pincotts, Maurice Richards, Dorothy and Bill Williams, and Sheila Falker. We had some visiting speakers. There was an exchange of pulpit with Ralph Morrish of the High Street Church, Macbeth Patterson, Eric and Leslie Land, Mick Jenkins, Ray Gill. Francis Dixon preached at a United Bible Rally, a joint venture with the High Street Church. Tony's Travels, 1973. Only one visit was traced. It was to London to take an anniversary service for a former student friend.
1974, the General News. Mike said that the Beatles split up in 1970, but we formed our own Fab Four. A male quartet was formed, which was Jeff Hodges, Ray Risbridger, Jim Dean, Roy Goodall. Val Brown would accompany, and their conductor and manager, I guess, was the one and only Mike Jenkins. Purchase of the offset printing machine, a quote for $13,000 for modernisation and installation of a new floor in the hall was turned down by the church meeting. £2,000 was collected for a minibus for the Mary Lovell Blind Girls' Home in Bethlehem, driven to Venice by Catherine Forsyth, then shipped to Israel. Open-air services in Steen Gardens. Graham and Jetta Payne off to India. New Life 74 campaign. John Donnelly became editor of Messenger. No visiting preachers recorded, and JAS was stuck in Worthing. 1975 Tab News. Tab had their first holiday at Springfield Court, Isle of Wight, and the speaker was Macbeth Patterson. Open doors commenced, Tuesday and Thursday mornings. Church room turned into a cafe, a forerunner for the coffee shop. Joseph Masumbi arrived. Peter Edwards took over from Rum Wayland as Sunday school superintendent. And again, Tony was too busy preaching to travel the globe.
Well, 1976 begins with a very special event. A church weekend at Pilgrim Hall in East Sussex was organised with Paul Tucker as the speaker. Tring House was purchased that year. Church member Tom Lloyd, British Home Secretary of AIM, retired. Challenge Literature Fellowship purchased the Christian Bookshop from Mr. Martin. That's the shop down in Chatsworth Road. OM ship Logos was in London and a church visit was organised. Tab homemakers met jointly with Broadwater C of E Young Wives. The church magazine The Messenger concentrated on the Chapmans and Bianto, 14 million copies sent out since 1976, and the wonderful provision of 49 Offington Avenue, now the home of Jill and Ollie Smith Boys, was also mentioned. Muriel Foxon was appointed to help on pastoral matters. Tony Sargent was presented with a hi-fi. Our church treasurer, Mr. Hatch, and Mr. Miller, our organist, both for a number of years, both died that year. And 1976 was the dawn of the Tab's modern missionary involvement, a pastor and a church ready to take off. In 1977, Tony decides to drop the word reverend and introduce the title pastor. Joan Hall introduced the lending library. Ray Gill is in charge while Tony is away in India. Phyllis Stenning retired as visitation assistant to the pastor. Tring House was opened. Doris Dove retired. There was a new set-up with elders and deacons. Deacons originally appointed were Ray Risbridger, Jeff Hodges, can't think who he is, Len Brooke, Mr. Beanie, Brian Hughes, and Jeff Robinson. Anthea McNeil becomes the editor of The Messenger, and Tony preaches his famous Vision sermon. Tony preached in an overcoat on his return from India because the heating had broken down. Poor chap. Unanimous decision to go ahead and purchase the bakery next door for £32,000. And visiting speakers for that year included an unknown person to us all at that time, George Verwer, and Gordon Wheatley. We now move on to 1978, when the Tab is privileged in having Sir Frederick Catherwood speak at the FIEC conference held here. Joseph and Hannah Musembi spent a year at LBC. Tony introduced his Bible studies in Nehemiah, arguably his most influential series. We exchanged contracts on the premises next door. £43,000 was raised in one day. The work coordinators for that project were Jeff Robinson, Nigel Land, David Miller, John Milton, and Robin Searle. New method of cataloguing tapes was introduced by Brian and Jenny Hughes, operating from Barnes Green. Muriel Bocking celebrated 50 years since she and her husband departed for the mission field in North Africa by travelling to Gibraltar, Tangier, Rabat, Saliara and Marrakesh. And Peter Bays travels to Beirut, the Seychelles, doing FIBA work. During that year, visiting speakers included Lance Lambert in Battle for Israel, George Verwer again, the Tab's formal introduction to OM, Mike Lythe, Ralph Morrish, pastor at High Street, and Dick Saunders.
And World News for
Tabernacle News for 1979. Fred and Lois Chapman told us that they were to hand over Bianto to a missionary couple from Chad, and that was the beginning of the Cook family coming to Worthing. Assistants were appointed to help the elders in pastoral groups, which was the beginning of our pastoral group system. Wheelchairs were bought for two Turkana young lads called Peter and Simon through the coffee house and the funds that were raised. The new premises were dedicated by Harry Kilbride. Don't know if you remember what the premises were like when we first got them. I think John remembers going around and looking at them.
I can remember going with Tony, being asked to have a look round and see these premises that there were at the side and back. We didn't buy the whole of the property, but I was taken in, and I was excited. I can remember feeling my heart was bumping, you know. And I love to investigate. I don't like gardens that when you look at a garden, you see the whole of the garden all at one go. I like to go behind hedges and through doors. Same with this premises. There I was scurrying around. It was mucky. It was full of rubbish. It was dangerous because you could have fallen off the edge and gone down areas and so on. But I can remember thinking this was really some place for us.
The tracks were started, tracks 1 and track 2. And at this time, approximately 60 youngsters would gather each week for track 2. The Muzembe family returned to Kenya. The BBC, or the Bible Beginners class, was started with Dave Mitchell. And the Worldcraft shop opened this year in the new premises. It was a busy year for the Land family. Joyce involved with Worldcraft shop, but also Ian Land became our administrative elder. We had the first track 1 and track 2 holiday in North Wales in that year, and Andrea Boyling went to Austria with OM. And during that year we had just 2 special visiting speakers, Dick Saunders and Francis Dixon.
Yes, tab news now. Tab events for 1980. The Wayne Coffee Bar is opened. Key people, Jeff Robinson, Phil Gollidge, Les Stride. Death of Phyllis Stenning, a member of staff for many years. Colin Smith came to the tab. How long do you think Colin Smith was here? For 3 months before going to his own church at Enfield. What do you remember about Colin?
I was amazed when we were reminded that it was only actually 3 months that Colin was with us at the tab. It seemed a lot longer. I think the most thing I remember about him was with his super Scottish accent. It was the first time I ever heard that phrase, it's better felt than telt.
Arrival of Richard Sharp.
No comment? No, not true, Richard, don't mean it. That really was the start of some very gruesome illustrations for a few sermons, wasn't it? Do you remember that one about the boiling fat? No, we shouldn't go into details.
No, don't go into that. Okay. No, we're very pleased Richard Sharp came. Don't see me afterwards. Anne Christian went to South America on Doulos with Operation Mobilisation. The BBC, or Bible Beginners class, splits into a Bible discussion group with Dave Mitchell, Bible Beginners group with Richard Sharp and JAS. Tom and Jean Lloyd went to Tunisia. Catherine Forsyth and Geraldine Fox went to Israel. Patrick and Heidi Parrish and family returned from Nepal. Visiting speakers for this year was Len McGee for a youth night, Max and Francis Nicolaisen, missionaries in Kenya. £3,000 were raised for a Land Rover. Ben and Winston Webster, agricultural missionaries with AIM in Kenya, first visit. George Verwer, that's it. George Verwer of OM. Neil Rowe of WEC, and Archbishop, lovely name this, Silvanus Wani, leader of Anglican Church in Kenya, and the Reverend D. Jones. Oh yes,
related to somebody.
Yes, Alan Jones's father from Gloucester.
1981 General News. Ken Jowett preached on motto text John 15 verse 4 and 5. New editorial team of Messenger comprised Andy Milne, Joseph Ellison, Andrea Boyling and Thea McNeil. Track 2, 24-hour Bible read got to somewhere into Samuel. At fundraising dinner, a new fridge was made available for Stan Thompson of OM India. United Church rally at Sisbury Ring on Whit Sunday morning. Track 2 joined with Link Up holidays for the first time. Student outreach team from UCCF. Richard Sharp left the tab after 18 months to join Logos in the Far East. John Shepherd commenced his ministry at New Haven Elim Church. Home groups formed geographically with pastoral leaders. Visiting speakers included Len Magee, Dick Saunders, Manuela Shah, leader of OM India ladies teams, George Verver, Patrick Johnson, Operation World, Colin Smith, and Christian, now finance officer on MV Doulos, Ray Gill to Nigeria, Dave Hansen to Pakistan with OM. (1982). Oh, employment's topped 3 million.
Well, Andrew Bryant's employed on the TAB staff for a year.
Brezhnev's died.
So has Wilf Mortimer. Did you know Wilf's father, Bob's grandfather, was serving with the forces in Mesopotamia, now Iraq, during the First World War? On his return to England in May 1923, just at the time of the marriage of the Duke of York to Lady Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, his father was asked to take the responsibility for Wilf to convey the wedding present of the people to Mesopotamia to the Duke. Wilf was enrolled as an honorary Arab scout and attended at Buckingham Palace wearing a flowing Arab headdress and scout uniform to make the presentations.
Gosh. The Pope's visiting Britain. It's the first papal visit for 450 years.
Well, the TAB's had its fair share of visitors. Alan Kingsbury of St Barnabas, R.T. Kendall, Nigel Lee, Alan Redpath and Francis Dixon 3 Sundays in a row.
Goodness. Israel's invaded the Lebanon and Argentina has invaded the Falkland Islands. Britain is at war.
I wonder whether it will affect Margaret Rogers. She's gone to Carrick Garrison in North Yorkshire.
I don't know. There's a lot of publicity about the silicon chip taking off.
Do you think there'll be publicity about the Tabernacle Football Club that's just been established?
Possibly, yes. Changing the subject, wasn't it quiet in church on Sunday?
Well, Track 1 have gone to Withercombe Barton.
Oh. Of course, and soon Track 2 will be going to Vine Hall, where their speaker's going to be Steve Flashman.
The quote for the new floor in the hall and the modernisation was accepted at the church meeting.
How much was it?
27,000.
Well, I never.
Well, here at the TAB, some new developments are taking place. In-house leadership seminars are run for the first time. The TAB's own lending library is run by Josephine Ellison and the ubiquitous, multi-talented Willie Ring. A pilot project of 5 evangelistic lunchtime services complete with snack lunches leads on to Wednesdays at 1. And perhaps not quite so significant a development, new style missionary envelopes are introduced.
Changes to the buildings too, with modifications to the old high-ceiling church hall behind us, creating a new and useful upstairs hall with a bright and well-appointed church lounge and meeting room below. On the mission front, an important and strategic decision is implemented as the TAB underwrites the salary of Titus Kivunzi to establish him as principal of Scott Theological College in Kenya.
There are some interesting arrivals and departures. Ted Davey arrives at the TAB on an initial year's secondment from OM. Ken Jowett joins the pastoral team. Miss Fairs retires from her post as Tony's secretary, and Joyce Dyer takes over the mantle. The MV Doulos arrives at the port of Shoreham. A party of young people led by Derek Cook, assisted by John McCara and Dave Mitchell, goes to Le Havre, France for a weekend's outreach project. Liz Milton goes to Vienna, Joyce Collier to the Seychelles with Phoebe, Ron and Daphne Whalen to the Garden Tomb in Jerusalem, and about 60 TAB members go to Brunel Manor, Torquay, but only for a week's holiday.
Visiting speakers to the TAB from a wide variety of backgrounds include Colin Smith, Richard Sharp, Ron George, Neil Rowe, John Piercy of London City Mission, Morgan Derham, joint founder of Tear Fund, Ian Hay, General Director of SIM, ex-prisoner Ken Lancaster, John Earwicker, guest speaker at a Track 2 holiday at Vine Hall near Robertsbridge, and Helen Roseveare, making history as the only woman to have preached twice at the Tab. Here at the Tab, all sorts of things are happening. So much, in fact, that Notes and News has to expand to 4 pages to accommodate developments. The elders are elected to groups, a new minibus is purchased, Ted Davies' temporary secondment is firmed up by his appointment to Tab staff and later the pastoral team. A regular ladies' exercise evening commences, and a newly introduced handbell ringing team adds to the richness and variety of the Tab's increasing musical repertoire. 21 Westbourne Avenue is purchased by the Tab. A fundraising project by Track 2 raises sufficient money to purchase bikes for a group of mission workers overseas, and a collective Christmas card is introduced for the first time. Comings and goings, Danny Marabi arrives in England from Beirut. A choir from Mizoram, Burma visits the Tab. The MV Logos visits the port of Shoreham. Dave Hansen goes to All Nations College to prepare for missionary service. Tony visits Heidi and Patrick Paris in Nepal. Ken and Denise Woods to the Garden Tomb, Jerusalem. Gary Goodall to Pakistan. And Larry Hersey and Celia Risbridger go to OM, Belgium.
Visiting speakers again reflect a wide sphere of Christian activity, keeping us challenged and well informed. They include 2 very contrasting Georges, George Duncan and George Verwer, Dick Saunders, Eldon Corsi, Alfie Franks, return visits of John Piercy and Ken Lancaster, Peter McClure of AIM, Phil Booth of Radio Worldwide, Tony and Rona Gibb, and Jonathan McCroskey, European Director of OM, confined to a wheelchair following a tragic accident. At the Tab, Tony Sargent brings a memorable New Year message: going for growth, digging for depth, wonder in worship, turning the tide, living the lifestyle, and pastoring the people. And in a significant rescheduling of meetings and services, the Monday and Thursday midweek meetings are consolidated into a single Wednesday fellowship night. The Sunday morning service is switched from 11 to 10:30 a.m, and the Boys and Girls Clubs, previously held before the morning service, now fall into line with the new service time. The church mourns the passing of some key people. Tom Lloyd, a man of mission with service in China, India and Africa, Nora Nash after a prolonged illness, and, very suddenly, Brian Armstrong. A contribution of £2,500 is sent to Titus Kivunzi at Scott Theological College for a vital water project, and an open-air service is held in Steen Gardens, attracting large crowds.
Again, folk are on the move. Ted Davey attends the Doulos Leaders Conference in Lisbon. John Milne travels to Egypt for meetings with Middle East media. Larry Hersey embarks on a 2-year period of service with OM. Barbara Hatton is serving in Pakistan. Joseph McKim is evicted from India and moves to Nepal. CPO moves to West Worthing, allowing FIBA to take over their old premises near Broadwater Bridge. And Stan Barnden, Stan, the maintenance man, he joins the Tab staff. Some old favourites return as visiting speakers: Colin Smith, Dick Saunders, and London's City Mission, John Piercy. We also welcome to the pulpit Carl Isaacson, OM ship's captain, Eddie Askew of the Leprosy Mission, and Herbie Carson, formerly of Westminster Chapel, Belfast, and Knighton in Leicester.
More Tab news. The lads of the Tab football team do us proud by winning the Sportsmanship Trophy. The church holiday takes place in Evelyn Gubbin's old stomping ground, Sidmouth in Devon. The Tab office gets real with information technology, purchasing a sophisticated new computer. And the Tab looks back in a sparkling New Year's Eve review. That was the year. That was.
Now, the Tab events in 86, there were numerous, but these seem to be the outstanding ones. Leslie Land, a former pastor, died, as did Miss Fairs, Tony's secretary for 13 years. FIBA and AWM were welcomed to Worthing. London Emmanuel Choir and Helen Roosevelt visited and introduced the Lord's Prayer as we now sing it. Andrew Hanson's valedictory service took place at Lansdowne Baptist Church before he joined the AWM. Visiting speakers included George Duncan, David Abernethy, John Piercy, and Peter Maiden. Thank you. Now, what were the TAB events in 1987? JAS acquired a computer and preached. I'm sorry. He acquired a computer and preached his kinsman Redeemer and King's Cross sermons. I beg your pardon, I misread that. The Tabernacle Football Club, without a computer, won the Brighton Challenge Shield. Maybridge requested urgent help. Ron and Daphne Wayland led the response. Bless them. Vision of a welcome desk and church alterations shared with the church. A list of people left for various parts of the world. Catherine Forsyth left for Ramallah in Israel. Leona Boardman left for Spain, John Milner to Egypt, and Jackie Hill to Zaire. Richard Sharp, Richard Wurmbrand, and George Verver were among our distinguished visiting speakers. Thank you.
Back here at the TAB, it was the first year that Evelyn Gubbins set the TAB's year text to music and set a good precedent as well. The men's fellowship started with a Burns night. There was a sponsored car wash done by Manor, which raised £132 for FIBA Zimbabwe. There was a fellowship night at the Lido, or Lido, and Guess Who started a one-man campaign to keep the Lido open for swimming. Colin Urquhart came and spoke to the minister's fraternal. The Jesus film was shown at the Connaught Theatre. Tony Ford was elected an elder, and we had visits too from George Duncan, Eric Delve and Rodney Kingston. Going abroad, though, were many other people. Margaret Hayburn went to Mombasa in southern Korea with YWAM. David and Irene Hansen had their visa application rejected to go to India, so they joined the TAB staff. John and Jean Hansen became joint personnel directors of AWM, and they went to Aix-en-Provence. Jackie Hill went to Bangladesh, and still abroad, the Logos 1 was struck rocks in the Beagle Straits in South America, but fortunately without loss of life. Coming here from abroad were various speakers. George Verwer, again, and Tom Hamlin. Valery Baranov, the Russian rock dissident. Bishop Matt Nyagwazwa, who nearly drowned trying to baptize Colin Risbridger. Dr. Titus Kabunzi from Kenya. Jackie Pullinger from Hong Kong. Joseph Ton from the Romanian Evangelical Church. More comings and goings, there were pastoral changes. Ted and Margaret Davey left to go to Carshalton. Hugh Hill started studying at London Theological Seminary and took over at Maybridge. Andrew Bryant went to Peacehaven. Tim Saunders, not the original, preached with a view in August, was an assistant in the ministry in October, and was Pastor Tim by Christmas.
In 1989, the sanctuary alterations were completed, either at the front or the back, depending on which way you're facing, the carpet and the cushions, and R.T. Kendall leads the dedication service. The closed-circuit TV was introduced, and the protracted issue of the front doors still went on. Ishmael and his Glory Band visited us, along with the Billy Graham Live Link. Mission 89, with the Reverends Peter Dominy and Graham Jefferson, came at the TAB. Midweek early morning prayer meeting was introduced. The coffee rota begins for the after-church fellowship. Boys Club go to Blackpool for the illuminations. Manor raised £3,200 with their Christmas cracker project. The last men's breakfast was held at Wimpy's Montague Street before they closed. Bishop Frank Retief was the speaker. As was said earlier, we don't put these together. The harvest supper was held in 1920s style. There was a 21-man working party went to work on board Logos 2 in Amsterdam, and I'm just hoping the air conditioning in the dining area is still working. The training course for potential tab leaders was begun. Proxy votes were allowed for tab elections for the first time, and Brian Cripps and Hugh Hill became elders. Maybridge produced its own Notes and News. Pete Gilbert, Harry Larson, Stan Thompson all visited us. Gerald Coates leads the Ministers Fraternal at Fittleworth. Eric Land and Mary Eggleton both die. Mura Jameson retired as matron of Koinonia. From abroad, Richard Sharp visited us from the States, and the Lackey family returned to the States. Hennika Cook went to Senegal, Janice Lee to Gibraltar, and Len Gruber to Nairobi.
Speaking of other places other than the Tab, things were happening in the Tab as well, of course. There were 2 new elders, Derek Cook and Alan Jones, and the Sunday services were now videoed. Perhaps there's a connection there. And Eric Harmer preached for the first time in the Tab, and the new doors were put on. The Manor Group cycled all the way from Worthing to Bexhill, and they raised £800 for the bikes for Burkina in Africa. There's another one here for Brian, a very important one.
This is it, yeah. Tabernacle Football Club won Sportsmanship Cup for 2nd year running. It's just a start, this is. It's just a start.
This year also marked the home call of Dorothy Fairs, sadly missed. She was Tony's first secretary, functioning from the front room at home. And Tony described her as a true friend and a most charismatic person. Lorries began to go to Romania, and Reg and Vi Gibbs and Pam Hinderwell retired after 32 years at CLF. People were going all over the place as usual. Amongst them, Jim Dean went to Hong Kong, the Goodalls to Tanzania, Gustav to OM for a year, Kathy and Greville went to Jamaica, the Lackeys to Egypt, Alan Collier, John Davison, Len Gruber, Muriel Foxon went to Romania, and the Chilvers to Nepal and Karachi. We had interesting visiting speakers, including Richard Sharp, Peter Lewis, Peter McClure, and George Verver. A very interesting person joined the pastoral staff, Hugh Hill.
General news from the Tab then. Well, heading it, JAS sabbatical declared a failure by JAS. Harmers arrived, Fittleworth refurbishment and work launched. Joyce Dyer retired and Beryl Lure took over. New elders Brian Cripps and John Kennard, Stephanie Taylor to OM, and Anne Christian to Bolivia. The Bulgarian lorry episode, which came over here full, was going to return empty, but returned full after urgently donated provisions. And the Saturday market stall commenced. The death of Fred Chapman, who was a wet pioneer and founder of Bianto. Also deaths of Billy and Arthur Kennard and Miss A. Kilby. Miss A. Kilby is noted for the lady who stuffed £10 notes in a Bible so she could give to Tom Hamlin. Harvest Thanksgiving, followed by an auction. That was fun. That was great fun, that was. Retirement of Stan Barden as a tab maintenance man. Multicoloured notes and news introduced. God, we are improving, aren't we? Coffee, tea now served after church PM service in the hall. Jim and Dean to Hong Kong. Romania, Len Gruber, John Sanson, John Milton and Gary Goodall. Berries to Nepal. And the visiting speakers, Dale and Elaine Hruton, Gary Guinness, Tom Hamlin, Andy Hickford, Colin Smith, George Verver, Solan Kartak and Cindy Perry from Nepal, Pastor George Chen and Rodney Kingston.
Sergeant Tony, he tell me many things about synagogue. He tell me one Mr. Ian Land, he retire. In his place came one new man, Mr. Dick. After Mr. Dick come, they buy new organ, new hymn book, and new van, minibus. I say, Sergeant Tony, I think this Mr. Dick, he got a lot of money. Sergeant Tony, he told me that many people from synagogue go to other country. He tell me, John Milne, he go to Russia. Tony Stubbs, he go Romania. Jim Dean go to Hong Kong. John Milton, Romania. Bob Bond, India. And Hugh Hill, Plumstead. I say, Sergeant Tony Saab, there's nobody left in synagogue. I think they don't like your sermon. Thank you. Thank you. 1993, Tabernacle football team won the cup. Nick and Sherry got hitched in America. Mr. Phil became maintenance man in synagogue. And they built another synagogue in Maybridge. Also, one Mr. Nick and Mr. Peter start Crusader group. I'm a little bit worried about this crusade business. We don't want to start all that hanky-panky again. Also, in 1993, Sergeant Tony, he tell me in synagogue they are thinking about a window. And he's looking through the window and he see many countries and many people. All the synagogue people are praying when they are looking through the window. I say, Sergeant Tony, prayer is a good thing, but how is it possible you see so much through one window? What is this window? How big is it? He said, 1040 window. I say, how is it possible you see so many things through window only 10 by 40? It's not possible. But he's a very clever man. He's a good man. Good evening.
Tab News. David White was awarded the OBE. Prisoner Midar Debarge's testimony was published in the Times by Bernard Levin. Mrs. Hike, Houseman Mayor, and Reverend Sam Yeganazar visited the Tab following the World Evangelical Fellowship's posthumous award to Bishop Hike for this work in Iran. The Maybridge Church was opened. Arguably the service of the decade, How Can You Believe in a God of Love? When Tony Ford and Len Gruber shared with us the heartaches of their families and sufferings. Tony's book, The Sacred Anointing, was published. 10,000 copies were subsequently sold. Hodder and Stoughton nominated it as one of their books of the year. The Tab Family Conference at Ashburnham Place with Peter Maiden and Campbell McAlpine. The J. John Mission was in that year. The Flower and Craft Festivals were held. The Craft Festival raised over £2,000 for leukemia research. We had a visit from the African Children's Choir, Tina Heath to cameo, and the first visit of Dr. Ed Clowney. Beryl Lure left the Tab office and was replaced by Chris Howie. Fiona and Kevin Boyce joined Logos. Denise Winterbank went to teach the Hungarians English for a year, and Tony was campaigning for the prevention of screening of explicit films locally. Decision was taken to close the World Craft Shop. Gary Goodall was off to Pakistan, the Kendalls to Bethlehem and Cyprus, Steve Applegate to Romania, and the Ledgers off to South Africa. Major items of local news was the exportation of live animals from Shoreham to the continents. Both Tony and Rowena and a few other members from the Tab were down there on the picket lines. Tony was busy writing letters to local press on animal exports and the types of fields shown at the Dome. Marriage seminars and car maintenance courses commenced. Manor raised £900 for their Eat Less, Pay More fund, raising efforts for the homeless in Worthing. The Hammonds joined AWM. Mike and Cindy Jones investigated the possibility of working in Turkey. Neil and Jane Kinghorn joined up with London City Mission. Russell Tate will be off, or may have gone, to Cincinnati to work with the Salvation Army. Jerusalem Joy performed by the choir at Easter. Against the Night, OM's dramatic challenge visited Worthing and featured Bill Drake and Richard Sharp. Stan and Connie Whitfield joined the team at the Garden Tomb in Jerusalem. Stuart Tweed joined the growing list of having driven to Romania, this time delivering a minibus for the Axe Trust. David Gibbs, now curate at St Anne's in Oxford. Visiting speakers included Nina Zagul, editor of Magella, Titus Kavinci, thanks Lucien, principal of Scott Theological College in Kenya, and again we had a visit from Dr. Ed Clowney. John Major resigned, and Stephanie and Andy got engaged. Thank you.
Oh, it's difficult to know what to say except thank you all very much. Very touched and appreciate all your love and kindness tonight. Thank you.
I can't add much to that. We're very grateful. We're very moved. But whatever has been achieved because of you. So many people who should have been acknowledged because they have made their own contributions. We've just done our bit, and we're grateful to every lady, every man, every young person. We've got many memories, and we've got tremendous hopes. We love this congregation.